again for another episode of The Wrap today, episode 43.
Yeah,
right? I'm
we're
correct on that.
inching ever so closer to the big episode 50.
5-0.
We've got to figure out what we're doing for it.
Well, we talked about it a few weeks ago. I mean, the two people who watch would maybe hopefully remember, but we talked about doing an actual live episode for that.
Yes.
So still move towards that, figure out exactly what we're going to do with it. We still have a little bit of time. We're still 7 episodes away.
7 weeks. Yeah.
7 weeks. We'll figure it out what we're going to do. But
They'll
just
put us after Easter sometime.
Stay tuned. Stay tuned. We do want to do a live episode and have you be a part of that and really make that a big thing and talk to you about even doing like a Q&A and stuff like that. So we'll figure that out, exactly what we're going to do there. I promise you, I've got my Surface here in front of me, but nothing amazing is going to happen as a result of that. It's just sitting there.
It's felt like you're at a news desk.
Yeah, I'm at the news desk here. I'm going to do like a break. I'm going to do some very like hard-hitting editorial. Not at all. I was just doing work before we came on the air here, so that's why it's sitting there. I didn't feel like moving it. I'm going to take some swigs on my go-go juice as well too, as we get going for this morning. We are today talking about introducing the character and the person of Moses into the story.
Yes, Moses.
So we talked last time that we had spent several weeks in Genesis walking through kind of the patriarchs, the fathers of the faith, and Moses is definitely one of those big-time, big-deal guys in the story of the Bible. And the story we're going to talk about today, this particular slice of his life is a pretty magnificent part of his life. I mean, like, I just honestly, if you think about Moses,
his whole life was pretty epic.
It was like a big, old, huge epic, wasn't it?
Yeah,
like an action
from beginning to the end.
It was. Yeah. There was nothing boring about that life. He's put into the Nile as a baby in a basket in the midst of a genocide.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a pretty heavy start to life.
And then is found by the daughter of the guy who started the genocide.
Coincidentally. I use those facetiously. That's our word of the day, by the way. Facetiously. Found by Pharaoh's daughter, so he becomes de facto Pharaoh's grandson.
Isn't that? God's got a sense of humor. Because the very guy that was trying to kill off the Israelites basically ends up taking an Israelite under his wing and training him.
And I would say, my suspicion is, and many people's suspicion is, although Pharaoh was not the natural born son or grandson of Pharaoh, many believe, and it's not a stretch of the imagination because we know in Moses' life he becomes second in command in Egypt. He's next in line to become Pharaoh. That's really odd, yes, I'm trying to kill all the Hebrews, all the Israelites, and then fast forward 40 years and he's on like the precipice of ruling all of Egypt, being the Pharaoh. That's a bit odd. I've always wondered that, by the way. He's floating down the Nile. Pharaoh's daughter spots him in the Nile, and they've got to know it's one of the Hebrew babies. It doesn't look like an Egyptian baby. I don't know.
Yeah,
there's got to be a difference between Hebrew and Egyptian. Maybe I really don't know. Maybe there's not. Maybe they look the same. But what is it about that? And again, it is all God's timing, all God's plan. But what is it about that she finds that baby? Dad finds out about the baby and says, I said to kill all those kids, but he's spared. And it's just it's amazing.
Yeah, it's either a matter of him trying to give his little girl what she wants, or the fact that maybe God just blinded him to that fact. You know what I mean?
I think it's a lot. I think it's a lot of a mixture of things. And it isn't right. It shows the very human side of Pharaoh. Yeah. That as much as he was bloodthirsty and he wanted to kill these Hebrew boys because he felt threatened by the whole population, when you've got a daughter who wants something, it changes a lot of stuff, doesn't it? Yeah. And I also think, too, like, as cold and cruel and ruthless as people can be, it's easy to impersonally detach yourself and say, I want to kill babies. But when one floats up to your home, and you touch that baby, you hold that baby, and you love that baby, it changes everything. You're just that's just a really powerful start to Moses' life there. And you can just see right from the start, God's got his hand on this guy. Yeah. So he's raised in the palace for 40 years. And I said, what's very interesting about Moses' life, we're really going to hit all of these. His life is broken up into thirds. And what I mean by that is you get about 40 years of his life in Egypt. Well, we're going to talk about, we're not really going to talk about that today. We didn't talk about that on Sunday. The second third of his life is the next 40 years, and you find him in the desert as an 80-year-old man tending his father-in-law Jethro. I said, doesn't that make you just want to, like some chaw in your mouth and spit like Jethro? Tending his father-in-law Jethro's flock, that's his next 40 years, and then what we would probably, and what most people would probably most recognize the last 40 years of his life would be when he leads God's people out of Egypt, becomes the leader of the Israelite people, leads them in the wilderness, 10 Commandments, all that stuff.
All the Charlton
Heston things. All the Charlton Heston things that we're going to talk about for the next few weeks.
Right.
We're going to catch a lot of Moses' life here, just not so much the first 40 years. We're going to talk about the last 2/3 of his life.
Yeah.
Because that's really when God uses him.
That had to be a culture shift for him going from, that's basically like going from city slicker to like country bumpkin.
Yeah, it's
right?
like
going from Prince of Egypt to tending the sheep.
Yeah.
That had to be.
It is kind of like the movie City Slickers, isn't it? Right? They take them right out of the city and throw them out in the wide open prairie, and they're like, I don't know what to do. That's a culture shock in every sort of way. And there is a very interesting moment in Moses' life, and you're thinking to yourself, why?
Yeah.
Why would you give up all the privilege, advantage? Everything was at his fingertips. At this point, Egypt is without question the most powerful empire in the entire world. He is right there at this, like I said, he ascends to second in command. I call it vice president of Egypt, that's probably not what they said at that point, but vice president of Egypt. And there's a point where God and this is just so amazing, right? When we've got our own thing that we're doing, we have our own plans, we're enjoying our own convenience and comforts of life, and God comes into our life and he just zaps us right in the heart.
Yeah.
And Moses gets this call in his life and he says, I want to identify with my people.
Yeah.
I'm not an Egyptian first, I'm a Hebrew. I'm an Israelite. And in fact, Hebrews 11 would reference to this in saying that, in essence, I'm not going to quote it exactly right, but saying that Moses kind of forsook being an Egyptian and having all those advantages so that he could identify with God's people. And because of that, Hebrews 11 lauds that faith. And it is. I mean, that's monumental to be able to say, I'm going to leave all this behind. I come to you today and I'll be like, you know what? I'm going to give you $3 million. That'll set you up really well for the rest of life, right? And there's something in you that just says, this doesn't feel right. Again, not that there's anything wrong with $3 million. There's nothing wrong with wealth. But you understand what I'm going for.
Right.
What I'm really saying is I am affording you a privileged life. You don't have to worry about anything the rest of your life. Everything's taken care of.
Yeah.
Pretty comfortable, pretty convenient. And there's just something in you that says, this doesn't sit right. It doesn't feel right. That'd be a monumental kind of shift and moment there. And that's what happens with Moses. So when I identify with my people, I mean, not that I'm going to squander what's been given to me in my 40 years of being in Egypt, but these are my people.
Yeah.
You know that, right? And at points in your life where you're like, I could do a lot of different things in my life, but these are my people.
Yeah.
I just think about it this way, and I kind of connect it, and I don't do this to make this like a huge personal story or anything, but I say this in like the gentlest way possible. I love New Heights, and I love Connersville.
Yeah.
But there have been points where I kind of think to myself, I think this is just kind of like an attack of Satan, be like, you could go do other things, man.
Yeah.
You could go and be other places.
The grass is always greener
over there,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I just always come back to the place and the point with New Heights in particular and with Connersville in general. It's like, these are my people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I can't leave this. I can't go away from this, and I've got to do whatever I can to love these people well and love this community well. And that's kind of what happens with Moses, but like on a much bigger, more significant way. He identifies with the people. To the point, what happens? He goes out one day and he sees an Egyptian beating on a Hebrew, and what does he do?
He kills the Egyptian.
So you can imagine that's a no-no.
Yeah.
They don't take kind of that. Here's really
So
interesting.
you can really kind of see Moses. Well, it may have been illy carried out.
Yeah.
You can see his burn for his people.
He's got a zeal. He has a passion. It's just misdirected.
Right.
And here's the thing.
So you can see that call of God on his life for those
absolutely.
people, even before.
I think he knew it. I think he felt it. I think he felt that he was supposed to deliver and be a representative and be a powerful leader for his people. But he just went about it the wrong way. And I think it's such an important part of our life is I think that so many people really feel that God is calling them to something and maybe to a specific something, but they just go about it the wrong way.
Yeah.
And at the wrong time.
Right.
All those things have to meet. God's divine call,
We try to
the
rush
right
things.
time, the right way, and then it becomes right.
Yeah.
Moses just, you're like, God love you. God bless your heart. God bless your heart, but you got it all wrong, buddy.
Yeah.
And so as a result of that, he ticks everybody off. Not just the Egyptians. He ticks Pharaoh off. Pharaoh's like, buddy, get out of here. I remember, this is not really a great movie to put next to the Bible and be like, this is exactly what happened, but I don't know if you've ever seen Exodus, Gods and Kings. Have you seen that movie? It's got Christian Bale in it. This is a very interesting scene when he does that and he kills that Egyptian. You would suspect that Pharaoh's like, I'm after you right now, but and I don't know how it really happened, honestly, in real time, but there's some compassion from Pharaoh and from the Egyptians saying, we're going to give you an opportunity to kind of get out of here or your goose is cooked. I don't know really how that happened, but regardless of saying, he ticks off the Egyptians, he ticks off Pharaoh, but what's most surprising on all of that,
He ticks off his own people.
He ticks off his own people. They're like, dude, what'd you do? Man, now you've made us now they hate us.
Now they're
going to
be really mad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's exactly
You've poked the beast.
You just poked the bear, right? And that's exactly what happens, right? Like Pharaoh gets even harsher. He demands more of them. In the meantime, Moses flees into the desert. He's in exile. He's a fugitive. I heard it said this way. I put it in a sermon this way. This is your ultimate bad day. Your coworkers hate you. Your boss just fired you and you killed somebody on the way out to the parking lot. And now you're driving to nowhere. You don't even know where you're driving. You got nowhere to go.
Ain't nobody going to hire you.
So fast forward, and when we come into Exodus 3, Moses has been in the desert, specifically in an area called Midian, which I've had a map, because I love maps, I love geography. You've got Egypt, and you've got the Sinai Peninsula, and then on the other side of it is Midian. So he's made somebody brought this up actually on Sunday. They said, that's a pretty good journey that Moses made. Yeah, I cannot remember. We looked it up, and I think, and don't quote me on this, but I believe it's over 5,000 miles. That's getting away from Egypt, isn't it, right?
Yeah.
40 years he spends, and what's very interesting when the scene opens up and he says he's in Midian, and the literal language is that he's on the back side of the desert. Now, the desert's bad enough, right? Could you imagine what the backside of the desert is like? But here's a really serious question though. Have you ever felt in your life, and maybe you feel like it right now, and maybe some of those who are watching, do you ever feel like you're on the backside of the desert? It's like,
why am I here?
What am I doing here?
Yeah. Well, and so far away from what you know God's called you to be doing.
Exactly. Yeah. I think he does. I think he has a clear idea, like God wants to use me, I just don't know how.
Yeah.
I think when we show up in...
or God wants to use me, but I don't think he can now.
Exactly. It's past my time.
Yeah.
Because by this time, I'm an 80-year-old man.
Right.
God, this is what most people think. God doesn't really use 80-year-old men. Oh, really? Oh, really? I think we show up in Exodus 3 and we see a man who has been beaten down. I actually termed it this way. I think when you show up in Exodus 3, you probably find one of the most insecure men that you find in the entire Bible. He's been humbled. 40 years of laboring on the backside of the desert, and I said what's most embarrassing about it is he's tending not even his own flock, he's tending his father. He didn't have his own flock of sheep.
Yeah.
This is, like I said, akin to you living in your father-in-law's basement.
Yeah.
Ain't cool, dude. Ain't cool. You're like, if you're setting out life goals, that's not one of them.
Yeah.
And so that's what happened. Shows up in Exodus 3. He's an 80-year-old man. And it says he's on the backside of the desert. And then all of a sudden, what happens?
The burning bush.
God shows up. Like, I don't think that's a small thing. I think isn't that so much like life? Because, I mean, like, let's think about this. Moses is going along in his very ordinary, very stale life.
Yeah.
Like, man, I've done this every day for 40 years. I'm tired of hearing sheep. I'm tired of breathing in sand. Just very ordinary. And isn't it like God to show up in the ordinary?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Probably in a bush that he'd seen multiple times.
Yeah, it's well documented. It's scientific. I don't want to get all scientific because I don't think there's a scientific explanation to this kind of burning bush. But it's been well shown that in that type of climate, in a certain time of the year, it would be nothing to see a bush just spontaneously combust. But what would happen with that one? It would burn out.
Right.
Burn up, consume itself. This one doesn't. And, you know, Moses probably saw like 1,000 of those kind of occurrences.
Oh, yeah.
But he knows right off the bat there's something different about this one. And it says very interesting in the language, he turns aside. And at that moment, when God sees that he's got Moses' attention, that's when he calls to Moses. And like, just a little aside here. How many times in our life do you think that God, because I've heard this before, I've got a great friend who always constantly says the line, I wish that God would just give me a burning bush moment. Well, maybe he has. How many times have we just passed by a burning bush and nothing happens because God knows he doesn't have our attention? And I don't think that God is going to call us to something and call us to something higher and call us out of the ordinary unless he has our full attention.
Yeah.
In this moment in Exodus 3, I believe God knows I've got your attention, and so he calls out, Moses, Moses, and Moses responds how?
Here I am.
Like a very famous phrase in the entire Bible. Here am I, here I am, I stand at attention, command me what you want me to do. And as he's pulling Moses in, he's also kind of pushing him away, doesn't he? He says, whoa, stop, don't come any closer.
Yeah.
Because where you're standing is holy ground. Take off the shoes, you understand whose presence you're in. So let's kind of speed the story up a little bit because we spent some good time here building this up and getting into the introductory part here. Through a whole set of circumstances and events, God reveals, very importantly, by the way, I actually think this is the most important part of this section because I think it's what Moses needed to hear, number one, but I know it's what the Israelites also needed to hear. And God says, I have seen and I have heard the suffering.
Yeah.
And I care. And so now I am, and this is a huge phrase. Don't miss it because it points thousands of years into the future. When the regal Moses would come, he says, I have come down. God says, I have come down to act for my people and to deliver them. And Moses is like, I'm on board with this. This sounds really good. I like the plan so far. But then what fouls everything up? What does God say to Moses?
Now you go.
I'm sending
yeah.
you.
And Moses immediately, I love how he just keeps arguing with God. But God, I can't because...
Yeah.
But God, I can't because...
I think over the course of Exodus 3 and 4, he has about 5 different excuses for why he can't do something. Most importantly here in Exodus 3, because that's what we're really focusing on, he has 2. And I would term it this way. The 2 that he talks about is he says, God, who am I?
Yeah.
I'm a nobody. I'm a nothing. My people hate me. I can't go back. Because imagine what God is doing here. God is calling Moses to go back to the very place that he was driven out of 40 years previous. His big problem is, who am I? And his second one is, I don't have the right kind of content because I know who you are. That's a really big problem, I feel like, with so many people in life. Those are identity issues. Yeah. I don't know who I am, and the reason we don't know who we are is why? Because we don't know
who he is.
Who God is.
Yeah.
And that's what Moses is fighting here. It's like, who am I? And God, interestingly, doesn't stroke his ego and puff him up and really build him up, does he? No. What does he say to him?
I'm with you.
I'm with you. Well, thanks, God, but I don't know really how that helps me at all. I mean, I think
good. That that's something that we often miss when we look at that story, though, is God. God didn't say, "Yeah, Moses, you're qualified." He said, "I'm qualified to lead you into it."
Yeah, I'm going to call you and qualify you.
Yes.
Because of my strength and my power. He does. He says,
It's not you.
Who am I? And that's the whole problem with it. It's like, Moses, it was never about you. Why did you interject yourself in the conversation? I've been telling you I'm trying to tell you who I am and what I'm going to do. And you somehow inserted yourself in the conversation. Who am I? And he goes, I will go with you.
Yeah.
And then he asks a very interesting question too. He's like, well, here's the deal though. Like, what if I go to the Israelites and I tell them that you've sent me? Who do I say that has sent me? Because that was a really big deal for the Israelites. You know,
Right.
God was always revealing himself by a name or a character trait or something. And God says, even more confusing, you tell them I am has sent you.
You am what? That's probably the first thing.
You am what?
You am what?
Yeah. I am who I am.
Yeah.
Just to really speed all this up here, because we've got limited time, I want to respect the time. What God is really saying here, and we understand that I am phrase is massive throughout all of Scripture.
Yeah.
I think it said on Sunday, over 6,500 more times it uses it in the Old Testament. More significantly, Jesus himself uses it with about 7 I am statements in the New Testament in the Gospels.
Right.
What God is really trying to say there is, every time that the I am phrase was used in Scripture, it was for God to say, I will supply the need that you have at that particular time.
Yeah.
I am not what you want me to be, I'm what you need me to be, which is very, very tough and very different things. Yeah. We have a preconceived notion of what we think God needs to be and what he needs to do. And God says, no. I will be...
Yeah.
I will be what I know that you need.
Right.
And so again, we ran through all these things, especially in the New Testament, and Jesus says, I am the bread of life.
Right.
If you're hungry, if you're spiritually hungry, if you're spiritually thirsty, I am the living water. If you're parched, God is that for us. Jesus Christ is that for us. You know, most significantly, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. For those of you who are lost, I meet that need at the very right moment. So that's what God is telling Moses here as he says, you're going back and we're going to bring the people out. And again, we've been following this whole story arc this whole time. That's a promise that God had made to Abraham way back in Genesis, the early parts of Genesis. That I'm going to bring you out of this land and give you your land, the promised land. Moses continues to struggle. Again, we don't have time to go into chapter 4, but he continues to make excuse after excuse. I can't talk.
With every excuse, God's like,
every excuse in the
here.
back, and the God says, that's fine. I'm going to go with you.
Yeah.
You are going to do this. And so that's sort of where the story ends for today. That's, like I said, that's kind of early part of the second third of Moses. Well, it's actually the latter part of the second third, but that's the early part of kind of Exodus there. Burning bush, and then we start moving into some other things. Next week's gonna be really, really good as we talk about Passover and Exodus, and just like we said, like every part of Moses' life is like an epic movie. Like, dude, you had like the craziest life ever, and Moses probably would have been one of those guys, been like, "I'll shut."
Simply understated.
Like whatever. Whatever. You know.
Yeah.
But just a fascinating look, and I think that we take a look at Moses' life, and again, it's not how can I be a Moses, but it's how can I see Jesus in this? And I think the very same things apply to us, that we probably are in our lives, we're in the backwater somewhere, and we're thinking, how in the world is God going to use me?
Yeah.
And God says, you just wait and see.
Yeah.
I guess the encouragement would be like, can we just stop in our lives at some point and just notice the burning bush moments that he's putting before us?
Oh, yeah.
And when he gets our attention, he can do some pretty magnificent things, not because of us and who we are, that we're something special, but because of his strength and his power, he can work through us.
Yeah, when we think of, when I think of, God, give me a burning bush moment, what I'm thinking of is I want something flashy.
Oh, yeah.
Out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
Right? And so, but we often forget that it's in those quiet times. It's in those ordinary moments.
So I said God majors
Yeah.
on using the ordinary to do the extraordinary. He does that. So
and it's to show his power, right?
Yeah.
Like had he picked somebody who thought they had what they needed to go confront Pharaoh, God's power would not have been as evident.
It wouldn't have played the same, no.
Right.
And so I think for us too let's let God have our full attention.
Yeah.
And then also let God be what God needs to be for that particular point in our life. It may not be the same for you as it is for me, but God, I am, God says, what you need, when you need it, exactly when you need it. And so maybe you needed to hear that today, that God knows you, he knows where you are, he cares about where you are, he sees, he hears, he cares, and he has come down. And again, like I said, the greatest demonstration of that, 1,000 years later, Jesus himself, Son of God, would show up, and he would come down and in human form be among us, be with us in a way that he could lead us out in the ultimate and the new Exodus.
I think of all the Old Testament accounts, Moses has got to be one of the closest to Jesus.
Yeah, that's why the New Testament authors would constantly refer to him and say that Jesus is the ultimate or the new Moses, and he is leading a new and ultimate Exodus for a new beginning. Yeah, there's so many parallels, especially when we get into next week. We talk about Passover, we talk about Exodus. Those are duh. If you haven't seen it before,
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, you can see it now in this. And so, like I said, hopefully that's encouraging to you, that wherever you are in your life, if you're just feeling like, hey, God doesn't really understand, God doesn't see me, God doesn't know me, he does. Yeah. He sees you, he knows you, he cares, and he wants to use you powerfully if you would just open your eyes, give him your full attention, and let him be in your life what you need at that exact moment. And so we thank you for joining us on another episode of The Wrap, and we will see you next time.
See you guys.